Long have they slumbered beneath their tombs, their previous lives a distant memory. Now, after many years, they awaken to find the galaxy they once held a rather strong dominion of, new, radically changed by the passage of time. But now it is time to rise again. Their tombs that was once their prison are now alight. Hundreds of millions of unliving warriors march as they awaken from their deathless slumber. Long forgotten pharaons rise as their subservient subjects await their command. These are the Necrons, and this is their story. The Necrons are among one of the oldest and most powerful Xenos races that inhabit the galaxy. Long before the rise of humanity from Holy Terror, there stood an empire built from much grief, by a race which the fates may have doomed since their birth. We simply know them as the Necrons, unthinking bodies of living metal, whose coming heralds the end of days for many a world. Where one should fall, it may rise again and again. A seemingly unstoppable force whose history is rather unknown, save to the most knowledgeable of historians, or the few races who battled them in ancient days and still remain to this day. Before their bodies of metal and unending lifespans, they were once beings of flesh like you and I. Their race born on a planet which fed off a radioactive star. These humanoids, once known as the Necrontyr, suffered greatly for simply existing. Their planet under constant assault by radiation storms which affected them deeply. The Necrontyr were born with many genetic defects which would in turn affect their rather short lives. This led to the Necrontyr becoming a morbid people. There was not much hope for the future, only the certainty that soon death would claim each and every one of them. Because of that, they would shape their cities in the forms of tombs. It was better to prepare for their demise sooner rather than later. The living among the planets knew very well that the only way they would truly be remembered is by the form of grand crypts. By dying, they had escaped the torment of life, and thus the dead deserve respect over the living. Still, the Necrontyr persisted, desperate to find a solution for the survival of their race. Should their homeworld star be the reason for their ailments, maybe it is time for them to claim others and be free from that which terrorizes them so. They built a fleet of ships, of a substance known as necrodermis, living metal, and took to the stars. It was time for the Necrontyr to forge an empire of their own and hope that they may find a cure to their short lives. Slowly they expanded, settling on planet after planet, with the Necrontyr amassing a sizable empire. Expansion was slow, for the Necrontyr had not been able to master the arts of space travel, where journeying to other planets would often take many years, distances that would far exceed the lifespan of their species. To avoid dying during travel, the Necrontyr ships were fit with many stasis crypts. This would keep them alive during their travels and allow them to settle on any planet they may come across. Despite many planets being settled and many generations of Necrontyr being born far away from their homeworld, the genetic weaknesses of the past had not weakened. It would seem that those ailments were forever bound to their existence. This, paired with many new foundings of Necrontyr dynasties, led to rising tensions within their already fragile empire. Dynasties would wage wars of independence, as Necrontyr fought Necrontyr. There was no reason in their minds to keep united, as each dynasty became a power in its own right. The Triarch, the Necrontyr's ruling council and absolute authority, began to worry. Such infighting could spell the end of their race, They needed a reason to unite their race once more, and what better way than a war? During the years of Necrontyr expansion, they had come across many sentient races. Many were easily brought to heel and destroyed if they were presented with resistance. But there was one race which they did not attack, at least not at first. A race so ancient that many believe that they were one of the first races to achieve sentience within the galaxy. These were the Old Ones, technologically and psychically advanced beings whose knowledge could not be rivaled by any other of the creatures who inhabited the galaxy. Their near-immortal lives allowed them to continue their works constantly, perfecting the methods to travel the vast expanse of space for the creation of the webway, which allowed them to exploit the immaterium and travel across vast distances in incredible speed. The Necrontyr had admired the Old Ones, meeting them and staying on relatively peaceful terms. They had learned of the Old Ones' near never-ending lives and sent emissaries to them. Maybe the Old Ones could share their secrets of immortality with them, and finally they may be free of the star which terrorizes their very existence. Unfortunately, the Old Ones were unwilling to share their so-called gifts, which led to the Necrontyr harboring a deep and jealous hatred for them. Why should the Old Ones outlive all others? Why should they outlive the Necrontyr? The Old Ones to the Triarch led for the perfect way to unite the Necrontyr once more. If the Triarch could make use of the Necrontyr's jealousy to the Old Ones, then their now fractured race could stand together and wage war. Emissaries were sent to all the worlds which now stood independently. They spoke of a need for a united front, where the Necrontyr could lead a bloody war against the Old Ones. If they were not so willing to share their secrets of immortality, then they would be forced to do so. So it was that the Necrontyr had been united once more, where legions of warriors from many dynasties were assembled and sent to attack the ancient beings. This set off the events known as the War in Heaven, where Necrontyr forces were woefully outmatched. The Old Ones' superior technology and use of the webway meant that they were always one step ahead of them, driving back the invading forces at any point they may attack. Bit by bit, the Necrontyr were pushed back to their already dwindling borders. Their race had indeed been united, but in effect only towards a suicide mission that would doom them. Many of the planets long held by the Necrontyr were eventually relieved of their hold as the Old Ones pushed them back further and further to their homeworld. With many generations of Necrontyr dying in this brutal and bloody war, it was said that some dynasties had asked for the Triarch to call for peace before their extermination. But the ruling council would have none of it, lest the Necrontyr once again begin fighting themselves. This was unfortunately an eventuality, as the remaining dynasties now began to fight among themselves in an effort to seek independence. Perhaps a last effort to secede from the Empire and hope that they can seek peace with the Old Ones. The Triarch now became desperate. Their empire was falling, their people fighting among themselves, and they were fighting an enemy that could not be defeated. Desperation would then become salvation, and finally damnation, as their fears were answered by a much older entity than the Old Ones, beings that harken back to the birth of the Milky Way galaxy, parasitic, godlike creatures who feed on all forms of energy. These were eventually known as the C'tan, the Star Gods. The C'tan, like the Necrontyr, loathed the Old Ones and sought their destruction. It is believed that the Necrontyrs' pure hatred of the Old Ones attracted the C'tan to them. Such raw emotion could indeed act like a beacon. The Star Gods came to them with tales of an ancient war fought long before many of the sentient races of the galaxy were even but a simple thought, where the C'tan and the Old Ones did battle over countless years among many stars. It was a war the Star Gods had lost. The Old Ones were too powerful, and in their desperation, the C'tan were forced to flee or be destroyed. They fled into the darkest regions of space to avoid the wrath of the Old Ones, hoping that in the years to come, a possible ally may rise and help them finally rid the galaxy of their much-hated foe. Who better than the Necrontyr to aid them? Both have suffered greatly from the same enemy, and perhaps if both joined forces together, then justice may be found. These are the webs the C'tan spun to the Necrontyr, as more and more of these so-called Star Gods made their way to weave their influence upon their unsuspecting new allies. They spoke of a great need to finally rid the universe of the Old Ones, and should the Necrontyr agree to aid them, then not only will they achieve the power they have craved, but the C'tan will also bestow upon them the secrets to immortality. Should the war to come be victorious, the Necrontyr may finally be rid of their genetic defects that have plagued them for countless years, and the Old Ones may finally suffer for not aiding them in the past. It was an offer the ruling Triarch could not ignore. Their people were dying, infighting was rife, and who's to say how long they had left living on this world? The pact was sealed with the Necrontyr bowing before the C'tan, forging bodies of living metal for them made of necrodermis, the same substance they used to create their powerful fleet. Now these ethereal entities walked upon the physical planes, and it would not take long for the Star Gods to begin instructing the Necrontyr on how they may finally achieve immortality. Forges were constructed and roared day and night. One by one, the Necrontyr were subject to a biotransference that would forever change their race and damn them for eternity. They shed their mortal fleshy shells for bodies of living metal, those in a similar fashion to what was created for the C'tan. As the Necrontyr marched to relieve themselves of their ailments, energies from their former mortal shells were cast into the air around them, to which the C'tan feasted upon with great speed, further empowering themselves as their servants marched to their doom. The Necrontyr were indeed gifted with the immortality they sought. Slowly they awoke in those forges with their new bodies of living metal. No longer would they age, feel pain, or be blighted by the worries of the living. This was, however, their damnation, with physical immortality being paid for in the loss of their souls. The Necrontyr had worked towards their own demise, as now they were called ageless machines. The Necrontyr were truly gone. They were now known as the Necrons. It was here that the ruling member of the Triarch, the Silent King, understood his mistake. He and his people were now doomed to live for the rest of eternity as machines. His subjects were now shells, totally subservient to him through the use of force command protocols. He now commanded unquestionable loyalty over his people. Their thoughts were his own, and they could no longer think for themselves. While this was a welcome change, considering the countless years that the Necrontyr had fought among each other, even this felt empty. Time and time again had the Silent King been tempted to override the command protocols, so that his subjects may once again think for themselves. However, he knew well enough that should they be able to do so, then surely they would seek to destroy him for damning them. With immortality finally achieved, it was time for the Necrons to fulfill their end of the bargain. War must be brought to the Old Ones, and thus did the Necrons and the C'tan march to war. Uncountable Necron legions fell upon the planets held by the Old Ones and their servants, as the C'tan swooped in to feed on any energies that were left vulnerable. Planets fell, stars were consumed, and whole systems were left completely devoid of life, as the unstoppable tide of living metal swept throughout the galaxy. This was the true beginning of the Great War known as the War in Heaven. It is unknown how many lives were lost to the wrath of cold, unthinking metal, but through many years of this dark crusade, the Old Ones were finally defeated, no longer being seen for countless millennia after. If they have been downright exterminated, or fled to unknown reaches to escape being devoured by the C'tan is unknown, but one thing is certain. An ancient foe to the Necrons had now been defeated, but now they must turn their attentions to those who damned them forever. The C'tan had fed greatly on the energies released during the war, and while that made them immensely powerful, their victory over the Old Ones made them cocky, and they took down their guard. They were not to expect the Necrons, who by this point had been channeling their weapons with energies of the living universe, for one first and final strike towards the C'tan. In one hateful strike, the Necrons unleashed the power of their weapons onto the C'tan, and while many Necrons had been destroyed in the rebellion against their star gods, the C'tan were shattered into innumerable shards. They could not outright be destroyed, for the C'tan are as old as the birth of the galaxy itself, possibly even the universe. Their destruction would have devastating repercussions to the fabric of reality itself. The shards of the C'tan were then bound to the extra-dimensional space of the Necron Tesseract labyrinths. Now the supposed master would take the role of the slave. The Necrons were finally free to control their own destiny. The war, however, was far from over. With the Old Ones defeated, many of their creations had taken the mantle. The Eldari, perhaps the most powerful of the Old Ones' creations, had taken dominion of the territories held by them in an effort to continue the war against the Necrons. And due to the Necrons' wars against both the Old Ones and the C'tan, they were extremely weakened. The Silent King knew well enough that his empire would be destroyed if the war continued, but peace was never an option. Instead, he would command his legions to go into a deep sleep, transforming the great Necron cities into tombs for their slumber. The Eldari would be allowed to shape the galaxy for the time being, but they were creatures of flesh, and eventually they would falter and fail, whereas the Necrons were immortal. Time meant nothing to them, and even if they should sleep for millions of years, one day they would rise up and take the galaxy as their own. As the last of the legions fell to their rest, the Silent King watched as his people, long-suffering beings of flesh, now an unliving mechanical force of destruction, obeyed his command. He had failed his people. He knew this well. Immortality was achieved, but at what cost? He destroyed the command protocols that gave him complete control over his subjects. Perhaps in the future they may prosper once more, and with that he disappeared, never to reappear again until millions of years later. An untold number of Necron tomb worlds had entered stasis for millions of years. During this time, many races rose and fell, and many long-fought wars near cataclysmic level had been fought, all without the Necrons even knowing. Some stasis tombs, unfortunately during this long period of sleep, had been destroyed. Eldari raiders still continued their quest to terminate any active tombs. Some tombs themselves had failed, for a stasis of millions of years can indeed make even the most advanced of machinery fail. While many of these tombs were destroyed or failed, many more stood in stasis. Millions, if not billions of Necrons may have been lost, but billions more lay in wait. For close to 60 million years they slumbered. The galaxy around them changed by wars unknown to them, but now it is time to rise again and take back what is theirs by right. Slowly, each of these tombs began to activate. One by one, the machinery within these ancient crypts began to glow their deathly green, as legions began to rise. A process that would take decades, some even centuries, but time was irrelevant to the Necrons. Soon enough, they will conquer the galaxy. Because of this slow process, a Necron tomb world is extremely vulnerable. As the ancient machines start to rouse after so many years in a dormant state, energies are released very much in the fashion of a beacon, which can attract all manners of life. Scavengers and scholars alike will be attracted to these energies, each bringing their own personal retinue of forces should the beacon have any hostile defenses, and it surely does. The beings that awake first are normally those which will act as minor defenses within the Necron tombs. While they might not be the most impressive of their legions, they are surely enough to keep investigating forces at bay while the rest of the tomb rises from their slumber. They began to awaken in the early years of the 41st millennium. Much had changed over the years. The rise of man, the fall of the Eldari, the Horus Heresy, and so much more. This is now a galaxy rife with war, and to the Necrons, it was a war being held within their own empire. The still thousands of remaining tomb worlds that once belonged to the mighty Necrontyr Empire formed the foundation of what the Necrons hoped to control. Over the years, millions upon millions of Necrons would wake up to the galaxy which is rightfully theirs. The Biotransference would not only change them forever in body, but also in mind for at least the large majority of the population. While the upper echelons of the Necron race still retained some sense of who they were as Necrontyr, with the more prestigious they were in life, the more they would retain. The majority, however, would be shells of their former selves. Numb to all joy and experience, bound to the will of their betters since they have awoken. The destruction of the command protocols by the Silent King meant that some of the higher-ranking Necrons may take control of their own dynasties, and perhaps when they were to awaken again, the Necrons will thrive. It is a common misconception that all Necron dynasties are warlike. Indeed, not all of them are as ruthless as Imperial records would suggest. Upon awakening, some Necron lords will deal with matters in a peaceful way if possible, where if their world or other worlds they once controlled are now inhabited by some other sentient species, a diplomat may be sent to politely ask them to leave or else face retribution. Of course, the large majority of Necron lords will not waste such time to enter diplomatic talks with lesser races. When enough of their legions are awake, it is better to engage with them in full-scale war and wipe out these intruders. Now, with the rise of the Necrons once again, the galaxy and its inhabitants must face an ancient foe, one that has been able to not only defeat gods, but also enslave them. With each passing moment, more of these mechanical skeletons rise from their tombs, and it is only a matter of time until the full might of the dynasties are brought to those who dare lay claim to their lands. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a bit of a short introduction to how the Necrons are in the Warhammer 40k universe. It's something which has been requested on the channel a few times to start delving into 40k lore, and in truth, after reading the recent 9th edition releases, I've realized that the 9th edition books go less and less into lore, which is a shame as it pretty much skips out on all of the origins towards the Necrons as the Necron tier. This video will serve as a bit of a test to see how you guys react to the introduction to 40k lore on the channel, so if you do enjoy it, let me know in the comments below, as I'm rather curious to see if you guys want to see more of this. Of course, this will also include Warhammer Fantasy lore and possibly some Age of Sigmar stuff too. I've missed doing lore, so this might be kind of fun to do. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.